What happens when a rising political star walks into what she thinks will be a friendly late-night interview, only to realize the host came armed with receipts? Tonight, we dive into the explosive showdown between White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt and Stephen Colbert. A confrontation that left the audience stunned and the internet buzzing. This wasn't your typical late-night fluff piece. This was a collision of sharp journalism and polished political spin, and the results were absolutely electric. Before we get into it, make sure to hit subscribe and tell us in the comments what you think really happened on that stage. The tension was palpable from the moment Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the Late Show set. She had that confident, almost regal stride, blonde hair perfectly styled, smile camera ready, waving to the cheering crowd. Behind his desk, Stephen Colbert watched with that trademark smirk that usually meant one thing. He had a plan. Karoline Leavitt, everyone. He announced. She sat gracefully, posture perfect, hands folded in her lap, every move textbook media training. "Thank you so much for being here tonight," Colbert began. "Thanks for having me, Stephen." "Great to be here," she replied with the polished warmth of a career politician. Colbert leaned forward, eyes glinting. "So, Karoline, you've had quite the meteoric rise. From congressional candidate to White House press secretary in just a few years. That's impressive. What's the secret?" Her smile didn't waver. "Honestly, Stephen, it comes down to hard work, dedication, and believing in your message. When you're passionate about serving the American people, opportunities present themselves." "Opportunities," Colbert repeated, tasting the word. "That's one way to put it. Now, our research team is very thorough, and they found some colorful comments from your congressional campaign." The audience shifted. The energy changed. "I'm always happy to discuss my record," Leavitt said smoothly. "Good," Colbert replied. "Because during a town hall you said some members of Congress were more interested in getting their faces on television than actually governing. That's a strong statement. Were you referring to anyone specific?" Leavitt gave a measured laugh. "Stephen, I think anyone following politics can see that both parties have people more focused on media attention than policy. It was a general comment about the culture in Washington." "General," Colbert echoed. He shuffled his note cards dramatically. "But you weren't being so general when you said, here it is. Congresswoman Martinez was, quote, a publicity-seeking opportunist who wouldn't know real policy if it hit her in the face." The crowd gasped. Leavitt's smile flickered for half a second before returning full force. "Stephen, I think you're taking that out of context." "Am I?" He shot back, raising his brows. "Because we actually have the video. Would you like us to play it?" That was the moment everyone felt the temperature drop. Leavitt paused. Just a second too long. "I think we should focus on the positive work we're doing for the American people today," she said finally, "instead of rehashing old campaign rhetoric." Colbert leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. "Oh, but Karoline, this wasn't old rhetoric." "That was just 6 months ago. And now Congresswoman Martinez sits on the Committee on Homeland Security, the same committee your boss relies on for national security briefings." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "So when you call someone a publicity-seeking opportunist, then have to work with them on matters of national security, doesn't that raise some interesting questions about judgment?" The audience went silent. This wasn't comedy anymore. It was theater. Leavitt's voice tightened, the polish slipping just slightly. "Stephen, I think you're trying to create controversy where none exists. Leadership means working with people you may have disagreed with in the past." "Work with them," Colbert said, smiling. "Sure." Colbert nodded slowly, that knowing half-smile still on his face. "But here's what I find interesting," he began. "Just last week, you stood at the White House podium and praised Congresswoman Martinez's, quote, thoughtful approach to border security legislation." He paused for effect. "So she went from being a publicity-seeking opportunist to having a thoughtful approach. That's quite the turnaround. Either you were wrong then or you're being disingenuous now. Which is it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Leavitt's media training screamed at her, deflect, pivot, control. But Colbert wasn't leaving her a single inch. "I think that's a false choice, Stephen," she said finally, her tone steady but tight. People can grow. Situations can change. People can grow. Colbert echoed thoughtfully. Sure, but in this case, it seems like it's your opinion that's grown. From harsh criticism to glowing praise in 6 months. That's some impressive flexibility. The tension in the studio thickened. Leavitt shifted slightly in her chair, her polished calm beginning to crack. Stephen, she said carefully, I think we're getting a bit into the weeds here. Your audience probably wants to hear about the real issues affecting their lives. Oh, I think my audience is very interested in this, Colbert replied, leaning forward, because it speaks to something deeper about your approach to politics. You seem to have an interesting relationship with the truth. Leavitt's smile vanished. I'm sorry, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Colbert said, his voice suddenly steel. I'm stating it directly. He picked up a card from his desk. Let's talk about your press briefings. 3 weeks ago, you told reporters that the administration had no prior knowledge of the pharmaceutical company merger your husband's consulting firm was working on. Do you remember saying that? A flicker of color drained from Leavitt's face, but she kept her composure. Stephen, I think you're conflating separate issues. Am I? Colbert held up a sheet of paper. Because I have the transcript. You said, and I quote, we had absolutely no advance warning about this merger. The administration learned about it the same time as everyone else. He leaned back. But here's the thing, Karoline. 14 days before that briefing, your husband's firm emailed the Commerce Department outlining the merger timeline. We have a copy of that email. The audience was riveted, dead silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a live public reckoning. Leavitt's hands clasped tightly in her lap. Stephen, I'm not going to discuss my husband's private business dealings on your show. But you already did, Colbert shot back. When you stood at that podium and made categorical statements about the administration's knowledge, you made it public. And here's what troubles me. Either you lied to the American people from that podium, or your husband didn't tell you about a major business deal his firm was handling. Either way, that raises serious questions. That's completely inappropriate, Leavitt snapped, her voice rising. My family is off limits. Colbert's expression didn't change. Your family became relevant when you used your position to make statements about their business activities. You can't have it both ways, Karoline. You can't use the White House podium to protect your husband's interests and then claim privacy when someone asks about it. The studio felt frozen in time. Even Colbert's usually laughing audience was silent, locked in disbelief. Leavitt's voice cracked just slightly as she replied, I never provided cover for anyone. I answered the question I was asked, with the information I had. Colbert leaned forward, lowering his voice. But that's just it, isn't it? You didn't have all the information, and yet you said absolutely no advance warning. That's not how uncertainty sounds. That's how a cover-up sounds. Leavitt's jaw tightened. I resent the implication that I would deliberately mislead anyone. Then help me understand, Colbert said, eyes locked on hers. How does someone in your position make a definitive statement like that without checking the facts? Because either you're incompetent or you're dishonest. And frankly, I don't think you're incompetent. The air in the studio was electric, tense, heavy, real. This wasn't just late-night TV anymore. It was a live dissection of power, politics, and truth, and no one could look away. Leavitt shot to her feet. I think we're done here. Are we? Colbert didn't move. He looked up at her calmly, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. Done? That's a shame, he said evenly. I've got about 6 more examples of statements you've made from that podium, statements that don't exactly hold up under scrutiny. This is ridiculous, Leavitt snapped, her voice tight with anger. I came here expecting a normal interview, not some kind of ambush. An ambush? Colbert raised his eyebrows. Karoline, these are your words. If being asked to explain your own public statements feels like an ambush, maybe the problem isn't with the questions. The problem, Leavitt shot back, pointing a finger toward him, is that you're twisting everything I've said to fit a narrative you've already decided. And what narrative is that? Colbert asked quietly, that I'm a liar, a fraud, that I don't deserve the position I hold. Colbert paused, choosing his words carefully. Karoline, I never said you don't deserve your position. What I'm asking is whether you're using that position responsibly. There's a difference between making a mistake and misleading the public about government actions. Every press secretary makes mistakes, Leavitt countered, her tone rising. Sure, Colbert said, but most of them don't have their spouses financially benefiting from the very policies they're defending. That's not a mistake. That's a conflict of interest. The words hit like a thunderclap. The audience didn't make a sound. Leavitt stared at him for several long seconds, her face flickering through anger, disbelief, calculation. Then she spoke, her voice shaking. You know what, Stephen? I've had enough of this character assassination disguised as journalism. Character assassination? Colbert looked genuinely surprised. I'm literally just reading your own words back to you. You're taking them out of context, she shot back. You're twisting them to create a story that doesn't exist, and doing it all under the guise of comedy so you can pretend this isn't just a partisan hit job. Colbert's expression hardened slightly. Karoline, if you think accountability journalism is partisan, then maybe you're not cut out for public service. That did it. Something in Leavitt snapped. Not cut out for public service? She shouted, her voice cracking through the studio mics. Are you kidding me right now? I've dedicated my entire adult life to serving this country, and you're going to sit there and question my fitness for office? Colbert didn't flinch. I'm questioning your honesty, Karoline. There's a difference. My honesty? She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. This from a guy who built his career pretending to be a fake conservative pundit. And you're going to lecture me about honesty? That was satire, Colbert said, his tone measured. Clearly labeled entertainment. What you do from the White House podium is supposed to be factual information for the American people. Don't you dare lecture me about responsibility, Leavitt fired back, pointing a trembling finger at him. You sit in your studio making jokes while people like me do the hard work of governing. The audience was frozen. No laughter. No applause. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Colbert's voice remained calm, steady. Karoline, the hard work of governing includes being truthful. When you stand at that podium and say things that aren't true, you're not governing. You're doing propaganda. Propaganda? Leavitt's voice cracked. You think I'm some kind of propaganda minister? Do you have any idea how insulting that is? I think, Colbert replied evenly, you've gotten comfortable bending the truth when it's convenient. And I think the American people deserve better than that. Leavitt stared at him, chest rising and falling, fury burning behind her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was low, dangerous. You know what your problem is, Stephen. You think having a television show makes you a journalist? But you're not. You're a comedian who got lucky. Maybe so, Colbert said, nodding slightly. But at least I'm honest about what I am. That was the breaking point. Leavitt's face flushed red, her voice trembling with rage. Honest? You want to talk about honest? Let's talk about how you ambushed me here tonight. How you coordinated this hit job with opposition researchers. How you're using your platform to destroy someone's career for entertainment value. I'm using my platform, Colbert said quietly, to ask public officials tough questions about their public statements. If that destroys your career, maybe the problem isn't with the questions. This is unbelievable, Leavitt said, shaking her head. You act so righteous, like you're some kind of truth teller, but all you're doing is character assassination for ratings. Colbert's face went still. His voice, when it came, was low but clear. Karoline, I've asked you about statements you made publicly from an official government podium. That's not an ambush. That's accountability. Levi shot to her feet, voice trembling with fury. If you call that character assassination, maybe you should reconsider the statements you've been making. Colbert stayed seated, calm but firm. Reconsider, he echoed quietly. Levi's voice rose, sharp enough to cut through the tense silence. I need to reconsider? How about you reconsider what it means to be a decent human being? A nervous murmur rippled through the audience. The tension had turned suffocating. This wasn't political sparring anymore. It was personal, raw, and ugly. I'm trying to be decent, Colbert said softly. I'm trying to hold public officials accountable for their words and actions. I thought that's what journalism was supposed to do. Levi gave a bitter laugh. Journalism? Don't make me laugh. This isn't journalism. It's a public execution. And I'm not going to sit here and let you destroy my reputation for your audience's amusement. She started to walk away, then stopped, turning back with blazing eyes. You want to know what I really think, Stephen? You're a small, petty man who gets his kicks from tearing down people who actually try to make a difference. Colbert looked stung, but kept his composure. I'm trying to make a difference too, Karoline, by asking the questions that matter. No! Levi snapped, stepping closer. You're trying to make yourself feel important by destroying other people. And the worst part? You've convinced yourself you're some kind of hero for doing it. Security began edging closer to the stage. Sensing the moment spiraling, Karoline, Colbert said gently, if you'd just address what I asked instead of attacking me, we could have a real conversation. Real conversation? Levy's voice cracked. This isn't a conversation, it's an ambush. You've already decided I'm guilty and now you just want me to confess on camera. I'm asking you to explain your own words, Colbert said evenly. My words? She repeated with venom. Here are some words for you. This interview is over. This whole charade is over. She turned toward the exit. I'm done letting you use me for your little comedy show. Karoline, we still have 10 minutes left, Colbert called after her. She spun back one last time, fury blazing. Then fill it with your jokes, Stephen, because that's all you are. A comedian pretending to be something more important than you'll ever be. With that, she stormed off stage, leaving Colbert sitting alone behind his desk. The studio was dead silent. Cameras still rolling. Colbert looked into the lens, expression grave. Well, that was unexpected. No laughter. No applause. Just the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. I guess we'll go to commercial, he said quietly as the feed cut to black.